Nikhil Abhrip is not there yet?
No, not yet.
Click on him.
Yeah. Yeah, he's live right now.
Okay.
We can continue the session, so please.
Yeah. So, so we start with the next set. So our woodworking doesn't, because we do wood as a base for our things, and we are generally not completely into furniture. We also kind of regularly diverge into other fields. Like one of them was we continuously do a lot of wood lighting. So lighting which have wood as elements or which celebrate wood as a component. And one of the most challenging things where, it was a very big of a collaborative thing, which was a peg light. So this was a light we designed for Godrej Design Labs as a part of a collaboration with an architectural house. The idea of the light was they had kind of given us a very simple intent that they want superbly thin, slender members. And it was something that we prototyped, we kind of developed on the mechanism and how to actually go about the support and everything. And how do you hide all these components into a very thin setting like this. So can we go to the next page? Okay, so something which was like a very modular system. So you can add as many lights as you want, you can add accessories. And also at the end of the day, the whole thing is a flat pack. And you can just like completely put it as a superbly flat sub object, and it can be shipped anywhere. So these kind of inputs were very important because we wanted to understand how to go about designing the object, and kind of sets a tone as to how we approach any kind of project. Like it always is intent which is given to us, and then you have to kind of work through the details, understand how do you do it without affecting the initial intent. Can we go to the next one? So the whole process involved a lot of sketching, trying to understand how each and every mechanism works. How do you make, what are the components which are a part of something like this, and how does the whole thing function? So once you have these things made is when you can actually guide an artisan as to how he should produce it, because they obviously have all the skills, but they not always understand how to use them or how to go about the complex production like this. So it's pretty much always on our end to kind of think through the entire process. Can we go to the next one? I think that explains the process.
Yes, why don't we start briefing them about the challenges that we had? Like it was a very sleek pole, and how long was it? If you remember?
7 feet. So I think in the next page we have that. The image.
You have that? Yes.
Yeah. So like the whole procedure of making this was that we need to make a 25 mm dia wood, which is 1 inch dia wood. So first, it's a very big challenge. Like how do you make a 7 feet long piece of wood in 25 mm? And if you put it on a standard lathe, you will end up either wasting a lot of wood or the wood will tend to wobble, or you need to have a very specialized lathe which can do it. So with your present infrastructure, how do you go about creating tools that will allow you to do something like this? This was basically made as a router setup where you turn the wood, and using very less amount of wood, you're actually able to get circles. Then the question came that if you're going to make a metal sleeve which fits onto it, as you can see the metal sleeve over here, it is slightly bigger than the piece of wood, and it exactly has to sit above it. And there are two long slits which are made into it. Now, if you use the traditional way of slitting, it will shake the metal too much and it will obviously destroy the piece. So then we had to work through the process. Like these are the set of drawings that was kind of given. Can you go to the previous one?
Just go to the previous slide.
So this was given as a set of instructions to the artisans, to the metal fabricators, to the woodworkers on how they should make smaller jigs how do you approach the problem piece by piece, and that allows them to align the holes, to align the entire job, and to get the final output. And a lot of work obviously is machine. There's a lot of hand component to it. A lot of pieces have to be kind of carefully shaped and turned to get the final finish. Some details of how it looks. It's quite a thin piece. It goes quite tall and it needs to be stable. So it has a hidden bolt. It has
The metal folder really acts as a very stabilizing factor for the length of the wood that we have.
And it also kind of has certain inner details which are hidden. Like you have a lot of screw system which kind of allows it to be a flat pack structure. Then we do have a lot of projects in which we keep experimenting with certain. Nishil, I'm in a meeting. I'll give you a call. So we do have a lot of things where we continuously experiment on products. So this was a project in which we had a couple of experiments that we did. We wanted to work with leather. It's a very common design. It's not something very out there or very different. But then for us, the challenge was how do you reinforce leather to allow it to hold boards? Like all the things that you see on top are ceramic pots. So each of them have a good amount of weight to it, and the shelf needs to be very simply supported, and the only support it generally has is the
So
leather.
basically,
And,
working with the tensile strength of the leather that we had.
precisely. And how do you make sure that the leather doesn't stretch beyond a certain limit, or how do you work through these problems? And that's something which was very interesting for us. Now, in the same project, we also worked on something called chardwood, and it is one of the finishes that we have developed over time. And it is a very popular Japanese technique of preserving wood. It's called Shoshuki Ban, and many temples in Japan actually have this as a very popular finish. The reason being that when you do wood, when you make something in wood and you keep them outside, the sun kind of burns it over time. So we're talking about a lifespan of almost 100, years. The sun would actually burn it and convert it into a black material. Now, this technique exploits that principle, and it creates a burnt surface on the wood itself. And when you keep it outdoors, or when you use it as a tabletop, or when you, it's a very hardy finish. It's not something that peels off that easily. So it makes excellent tabletops, kind of which are wear resistant, which can take a little bit of abuse, and also outdoor friendly. We can go to the next one. So this kind of a material kind of, also shows up the grains of the wood. It doesn't work on the color of the wood, but more with how the natural light reflects and how the light movement happens from the laminar level. And this forms a very interesting finish. So there are certain places where we have exploited this further, and we have done a few claddings where this becomes a very important design principle. And of course, it's a very messy process. The artisans have to really work through it. Anyone who works with this gets their hands really dirty, but then you see the final product on the left. It just has its own, it just shows something of its own. Go to the next one. So the walnut that we were discussing earlier, this is one of the slabs where we were kind of able to work on a really old piece of wood. This piece was about 5 feet in diameter. So if you count the ring of this piece of wood, it will date back almost 120, 130 years old ago. And it was made by a mistake, like it was a mistake of a woodworking company that they ended up doing a slice like this. And we kind of found it, and it had been with us for almost 2 years before a client actually came and said that, okay, this is exactly what I want, this is mine. And that is the kind of thing that we always look for. Like pretty much all our clients understand the value of doing things like this, and they always understand the speciality of the items that you make, and that is what makes it fun. So this specific client loved it, and it was a very simple low table that you wanted, and no modifications, just finish it and give it to me. And that's the beauty of it. It's just a very simple approach with a very simple leg, and I think that's
Yeah. That's it.
to highlight the table itself. Okay, then this was one more piece where we had a lot of challenge with materials. This was again one more client who wanted really like in the end he came to us and kind of said, please make me a cabinet, and we had no more wood, no more materials left with us. And instead of going back to him and telling him, okay, was buy new materials, we're like, fine, let's see if we can use waste. And the whole cabinet is pretty much made out of waste. It has been made out of small lippings of wood, with some chartwood details, with some veneers, some handles which we made ourselves with for internally. And that's what it is. Sometimes working with materials, you'll realize that you'll generate a lot of waste, and it's also important that how you reuse the waste in your designs, and how you also convince the client that that is also something that they want to do. And he loved it. It was a win-win for him because he made a cupboard without paying a penny, and for us we got rid of a lot of waste wood. Now when you're working with things like this, it is very important that the intent is very clear, and this is where the drawing and the discipline of making shop drawings comes in. Not always shop drawings need to be very technical, because finally at the end of the day you're giving them to artisans who in most of the cases have a issue with language itself, like they can't read or write English, and it becomes a hurdle. So it is very important that when you're doing drawings, when you're doing production drawings, and when you're creating your designs, you're able to kind of translate it to them in a very simple manner, like basic numbers, simple
In a very
outlines,
clear and yeah.
clear and crisp manner, which they can read. And that is something which is very important as a communication, because if you don't communicate with your artisans, they don't know what they're doing, and the whole system breaks down. So this is like an example of how we work, communicate with our artisans. So any design which goes into production always has a set of drawings, and which they interpret themselves in form of chalk drawings, and then it's converted into the final product. So I'll show you some examples of it live, and it will be kind of clear how we go about it. We can go to the next. So this is one more, the same client who had the bed, who had the big
The solid wood coffee table.
So this person also wanted a kind of a folding bed, and this is where we kind of get into how prototyping is very important for any kind of production. So what you see over here is a model. So this is the kind of scale models we make, and
I think
it
it
forms a
come a
very
little
important.
closer, Abhiro.
Let me, yeah, okay. So this is the kind of scale models that we work on, and it keeps changing. It's not like we do it because it's it's a very need based kind of an approach. So sometimes you don't need it, sometimes you do need it. And in this case we needed it because it had a lot of components which was very difficult to figure out in 3D. Like you don't know exactly how
The
the components
movement.
behave, how does it get stuck, how do you make sure that the movement is super smooth, etc. And this was made, and this is where we tested out all the sizes, and it's made to scale. It's a 1:5 thing made by the artisan to scale as an understanding of what he would do. So in this model, we would pretty much figure out all the joineries, like how does each wood interact, how does the joints work, what kind of joineries we want everywhere. And once we are sure of that is when we go to the next step, and we kind of do some markings, some form of tape drawings, and we take it into the product later. So I think the next one, yeah. So this is where
Shows that.
they're working on the it's a tape drawing, so it's a mix of model, it's a mix of physical thing, and you also have a little bit of markings that they would do to understand exactly how the pieces are moving, and that dictates the size of the upholstery that you would be using, the size of the cushions you will be using, everything. So it all needs to be pre-decided. Nothing can be left like later on we'll figure out as it
We
goes. So
decided on your site, while we are doing it.
precisely, and there's the process of production, like everything is fitted, refitted a few times to make sure that all the details match up to the requirement. So this is a kind of view of how the charring was done earlier by us. So basically take a blowtorch and burn the wood, and takes time. It's a slow process, but it is something which yields very, very hard surfaces. Like it is not something that will get damaged to it so easily. It doesn't need so much maintenance. And also it kind of
Page is beautiful.
shows off the greens of the, see the, the curves, the lines, all the features of the wood are very, very pronounced in something like this. So you can see some dovetail joints. So certain things like these things are very important, like, figure out how this is, where this comes and what detail goes where. So these are the kind of things that we figured out when we did the model itself. Okay, next one. Okay, so now we'll just take you through some of the prototyping phase. I think it will give you an idea of the different joineries, and this is just a little theoretical, but then it'll kind of give you an idea on how we kind of lingos that we generally need to be aware of, or at least be confident about if you're working with artisans.
The basics, the basics.
The basics, the super basics. So like how you saw the chair was prototype, how you saw the bed was prototype, we often have chair prototypes like this. So certain designs, when we don't have time to make them, we would actually do them in a small scale working model, and that allows us to kind of, see how it works. Like, okay, I know that when I do this chair, I have to really work on the backrest of it. It has to be a bent piece of wood. All the other components are straight. I know how my, how my seat fits. Like it has a complete seat detail with the inner rail and the outer rail and everything. So once I figure this out is when I can say, when the artisan himself knows that, okay, fine, this is the section I'm using. This is how the chair will look in the end. These are the details I need to work on. This is what I need to think about. And that is what we are looking at. We are looking at the artisan being an intrinsic part of the design itself. And sometimes we do make mistakes. Like this was the first chair, first version of that folding chair before it was folding. And what we realized is, we did not give the right kind of supports, and this chair would always tilt. So some things we learn when we do models. It's like something very simple, but then we kind of learn them as we are working with the model and the design. Then some of the chairs, we would do the prototyping so that we know, little joints and little details they need to be figured out, and also understanding how the design itself feels before it's completely made. Then just to give you guys an idea of how the joineries work, they progressively change from something which is very simple into something which is a little bit more and more complex, depending on what exactly are we working on. So things like something like this is called a finger joint, and this is where the, it's like just simple teeth and they get stuck into each other. And this is something which is often used for doing smaller units, like you would be doing small boxes or drawers or something very simple. We generally don't use it for really big pieces. And it is where you need to make the joinery a show stealer, and it's something which you want to show off. Then from there, we go to the next level of joint, which is called a dovetail. So I don't know if you guys can see it.
Yeah. Why don't
A
we
dovetail
start with the
joint is
tenon
called,
and mortise joint, Abhirup? Like,
I can show them.
yeah, it makes more sense then.
So a tenon and mortise joint, groove joint, is basically where a tongue, which is a piece of wood, and you have a groove, like to be very, very straightforward. And this forms the basic for any chair. Like if you're designing any form of a chair, this is the most common joint you would be using to connect your members up. And this joint can be exposed or hidden. So this is a kind of a one side exposed, and then you would also have a version of it which you would do for, let's say, a handle. So this is also a form of tongue and groove, which is at the corner, and we completely expose the edge. So this can be used as a handrest or, like the handrest detail. So when you do something like this, after you tighten the whole job up, it forms a kind of a seamless piece. But it's important for us to know the terminology so that we can kind of guide the artisans as to what details we would like. And that is the part of our theoretical learning. And it also helps them understand what you're expecting of the design. So if you look at the tongue and groove joint, it can further be concreted into something which takes care of a corner. So let's say you have a corner which has to be made. It is basically a set of tongue and grooves
The
which
three members.
three members. So it has 1, 2, and this is like a dead end kind of a thing with 2 holes. And when you assemble it, it's the tongue and groove, but then it has a variation to it. Then we come to the next set of joineries, which are your dovetail. So we covered the dovetail joint in this. And from the dovetail, we kind of evolve into the next set, which is called, like a half dovetail joint, where, like, just simple terms. Even some people would call it half bow in our, like a colloquial language. So it has one edge which is inset, one edge which is completely open. So you can only see the joinery from one edge. So it is often used in wardrobes or tabletops where you don't want the joint being such a pronounced kind of element. Then you have secret dovetails, or like blind dovetails. This is where the dovetail joint is a more advanced one, where the joint absolutely goes inside the whole thing. And it is done in cases where you need a lot of structural support, but you don't want your joineries to be visible and you want something very seamless. Now from there, we come to simple butt joints, where you just have the edges glued in and you have like 2 dowels inside to hold it in place. And then you can detail it further, with different inlays of wood. So these are all detailings that come, like it's not something that you need to plan always, and it's more like an organic process that exists. Now, to give you guys an idea on if this is visible behind me. So this is one, is this visible? Can we see the drawing?
Not very much.
Not very much, right? To do this, where this kind of a detail was supposed to be made, and this is a chalk drawing of the piece before it was actually constructed. And this allows the artisan to kind of again figure out the materials, understand the curves, and for us also to understand which areas there might be some mistakes, or where some issues might come up, or where we are not being clear on our design, or where we are also making some mistake. And that then is converted into the final product. I am not, can you see this? Okay, this is pretty heavy, so I can't get it all the way.
It's okay, it's okay. Huh.
Yeah. And then we do have finishes, which are also very important part of our entire structure, of our entire practice. So if you can look at the finish, I think now this is clear.
Right.
So this is what we work on is something called an oil finish, and it is very important part of our working structure. So this piece that you see over here is, like how an oil finish surface looks like. It is something which is very natural.
Finish? Yeah, very, very natural.
Yeah, it's something which is very natural to the wood, and it is like equivalent to using a moisturizer on a human skin. It allows the wood to breathe. It allows the different layers to kind of season over time, and you're not blocking it with plastic components. So it is very important that whenever we are processing wood, we also respect the material and
basically
also the
you don't
final
get a
finish.
layer above the wood, so whatever we are applying the oil, it gets totally absorbed into the particles of the wood, and at the end it's all moisturized, and you'll not get any dryness and all that sort of stuff.
So the same thing, if you look at like how you see the grains in this structure, the same thing if it is done in a melamine or a PU kind of a finish, it creates a more plastic feel. Like you can visibly see this being a plastic layer. So it's very important that whenever we are finishing wood, it you also respect the material itself. And that is something that takes it beyond just a furniture that you can buy, or it is something which you're adding value to as a product. So let's on to this, and we can take them over to the next part.
You have the ammonia pieces with you, the ammonia tinting.
You have the ammonia pieces. Maybe I'll just
Okay.
arrange it towards the end. Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay. Yeah. The shared screen is visible to you.
Yeah, it's visible. So Studio Red Wall is our architecture practice, is where we kind of have, we work on more projects which are hardcore architecture, and we try to see as much as we can use our knowledge that we learn, the prototyping and the different things we learn over here, and how it fits back into the architecture and, our main craft as such. So in this organization, we are 3 partners. On the right, on the leftmost is Karthik. He's also an architect who is a part of this process. Now in this one, there's one very interesting project where we kind of used a lot of these weird approaches to do a structure, and this was called Janghar.
Was a
This
project
was
based in
made as
Andamans.
yeah, it's a project based in Andamans for the migrant laborers. So this was back a year or 2 ago, when Andamans is completely dependent on a migrant workflow for them to kind of maintain their hotels and everything. And it's very important that you are able to house them in neat spaces, because it's not about the spaces being big, it's about the spaces being thought through, and it should feel right for a person.
Yeah.
And so that it doesn't create clutter, it doesn't create waste. So this is the kind of structure that existed before we intervened. Some structures were, in a good condition, some were dilapidated. You had pieces which are breaking down, falling down, etc. And too much space also leads to too much junk. So also a lot of waste had accumulated over time in these structures, and it was something which we had to address as a design. Like you see over here, it's breaking down because these are not made
It's
for, these are not
quite
designed
difficult.
for, yeah, it was in a bad condition, and also they were not designed for migrants, or, work. It's not a living quarters. It was designed for something else. And also one big problem we had in the site is the sand is the soil is basically sand. There is no hard rock. So whenever it used to rain, the ground would just become a liquid, and anything heavy with very heavy point loads would just sink into the ground. And that's why you see all these sags that had been moved.
Kings and everything.
Precisely. And then our intervention was to make something which is very simple, which can be shipped very quickly. When it is packed, it just forms a set of these flat structures. When you assemble, it forms a house. How much time you need for someone to assemble a house, how many people you need, how much area you're getting, what is the weight, because freight is a very important part of this conversation. How much does it cost for the client to do it? So it was a back and forth process, kind of figuring out this entire structure, and how can you approach this design in a very, very, very simple and kind of calculated manner. Can we go to the next one? So this was something which was made in Bangalore. It was completely prototyped in a shop, and then it was flat packed and installed in site. The foundations were very simple. We just used a bucket with cement and Balti foundations. And the beauty of it is you can just lift up the entire structure along with the foundation and take it to the next position. And when you leave the space, you just have some holes in the ground. You'll actually not waste. Your recovery is upwards of 99% in this case. And that is something that is very useful, because once the client doesn't need to house so many people, he can just knock down the entire structure, flat pack it, and store it until he needs it. And that is the beauty of it. Including the foundation is completely recoverable. Can we go to the next one? So this is how the foundation becomes a part of the ground. Next one. We can go to yeah. So in this in this project, we literally had we had to train people. So I think that was again an important part, because we were so clear on the process and the procedure that, you know, this guy that is on blue shirt, he's basically a guy who uh, climbs onto trees to get coconuts, and he's not even a carpenter or a, like, he doesn't know anything. We had to just teach him on how to hold the drill machine and how do you go quickly and how you make things. And the idea is, if you can figure out the whole procedure very uh, neatly, you can always kind of get anyone to train themselves into being a part of the process itself. Can we go to the next one? So lot of local materials were used. You have you know, mats which were converted into window screens. It lets in light. It's a very easy material you can buy. You can always, you know, get a new one, tear it up, and put it in. It is every part of
Can
this.
you use the existing ones?
Exactly. You can always change every part of this building, and that's the beauty of it. And internally also, the spaces are, everyone has their own space, and people did end up custom. You do have, you know, they would collect shells and make their own little space out of it. They would also have space to hang their nets, keep their clothes neatly kept, and even after occupying it for a year, you see that the space around it has become clean, and it doesn't have that heavy feel that it's being dirty or unkept. Can we go to the next one? And that is the response. So, you know, it's important that you maintain, you plan out all the things, including where they can keep their suitcases and everything, so that they know, you know, the human mind ultimately occupies the space they go in, and unconsciously they use all the things that we left them to use with. And final outcome is the outdoors is clean, the room is cool, everyone has their own space, everyone keeps it clean, and that's the main important idea of the design. Okay, and that's it, right?
That's it. That's it.
So I think, Nikhil, we can open to question answers.
Sure. So, participants are requested to raise their questions in the chat box. So, if like a fresher like to start with the project, so what are the things he has to keep in mind?
See, the main idea is that you need to respect the fact that a person, an artisan or a craftsman whom you're working with, obviously knows what he's doing. So it is very important that you spend the initial years just observing, because that allows you to learn a lot. It's also a self-discovery that one needs to be on. So initially, I think, you know, that's what our first few years was patiently observing how something is being done, and also kind of understanding what a client needs and how do you respond to it. I think that's like the silent observation is a very important part in the first few years, at least, of any practice, for that matter.
Okay, sir. Thank you. There is a question from Drashti Dave that how is CAD technique made dirt free, as when it is touched, we get back cold patches on head?
Okay, so in this technique, it is one of the process is to actually seal the char. So we use our technique is to use a variety of oils, and what that oil does is it hardens the char in place. So once the table is completely made, even if you rub your hand, even if you rub a white cloth on it, there are no
It's not going to
elements
leak
that come up.
or
It's always no, no, nothing, nothing. It's absolutely stable as a surface. I'll just see if I have a sample till then. If you have so this is like a chartwood sample. So as you see, it's like absolutely black. And even if you like rub your thumb across it, there would be no outcome of it, because the char has been sealed and it has become a part of the wood. It's finally the element which is being shown over here. It's like a part of the material altogether.
The next question is by Janice. Like, which material is long lasting, keeping a furniture in mind?
So as long as I think everything is long lasting, as long as you know what you're getting into, you can always make a furniture out of the cheapest wood that are available, but make sure that your finishes are always respected. Like if you go ahead and color pine with lots of, like pine is a light wood, and if you go color up pine with lots of chemicals and lots of paint and all, over time obviously it's going to wear out. So you need to be sure that, you know, if a material is light, treat it in that manner. If a material is dark,
Also,
treat it
also
in
you
that.
know, understanding well where you're utilizing the exact material. Like there is certain wood for exterior grade, there's certain wood for interior grade,
Precisely.
and understanding
Precisely.
what is the context that you're using the material in.
And
That
how
So I
plays
think
an
that makes it long lasting.
Yeah, and how to take care of it for a long time.
I think for like for our furnitures, we always, the kind of finish that we use, it has to be touched upon regularly, but you don't need an artisan to do it. You can do it yourself. So it's an oil finish. So, you know, just put, like for our tables, we tell our clients for the first 3 months, every Sunday, instead of wiping it with water, just wipe it with oil, and any oil, you know, olive oil, vegetable oil, baby oil, whatever you can get your hand on, just oil it. And once you do that for the first 3 months, then you know, shift your schedule to once a year or whenever you feel like the table is not being maintained. So if that is followed, I think I have
still
clients who
respond
are
to what is the need of the wood at that moment.
precisely, and the client themselves understand. And like I have had people who have been working with us, like, you know, are my first few clients, and they really maintain their tables really well. Like if I go back to their home today, it's in absolute perfect condition. Like it's like the first day how I delivered it to them, they kept it like that. The only thing
And
is
the
that it's
best
just
part with
discipline.
yeah, and the best part with oil finishes, it ages. It doesn't have, you don't get the scratches that it's not a layer above a wood, basically.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have the scratches or denting and all those kind of challenges that we have with other finishes.
Okay.
So
So,
it's a very simple finish that you can maintain forever.
so how you compare like the assembled handmade furniture with a like a ready-made China furniture?
What
See,
is
all furnitures are good. Obviously, I think the cost plays a big role in all these decisions. So, if obviously the budget is much tighter, people will obviously go for handmade or, you know, like a factory-made product. But it is important to understand that when you buy something which has been made out of good materials, it will just last that much longer and it stays with you. So that is
Okay.
very important. So understanding that, you know, why does the furniture from our grandparents' time still survive? Because they were made out of good wood with good labor, with good artisans and with good intent, and it was maintained in a good manner. But nowadays people tend to not concentrate on those things. They just want a furniture which they can buy, keep it in one corner, and, you know, 5 years later throw one and get a new one. So if you cannot have that attitude, that attitude is very wasteful. So you need to
Okay.
know that, okay, furniture is a part of my house. I am investing in it, and it should be at least a generation or two long. That's the
and in the
life that.
time that we're entering now, especially with the COVID situation, you need to
Yeah.
understand that have good pieces, you know, like have a value to your house, your surrounding, instead of just having a fast production attitude.
Sure, sir. And sure, ma'am. We left with few seconds only for the webinar. And thank you, everyone, and thank you, our guests, for such a valuable time. Thank you.
Done. I think, yeah, sure.
There are few questions that we can
Yeah, there are few
revert on
questions.
WhatsApp.
So maybe